Well, good morning. We are going to take a look at Psalm 48 this morning. And in order to do so, I feel like we need to do a little bit of review on our eschatology because we are dealing with a really key part of eschatology that if we don't understand the prophecies of the scriptures and where it all fits, it can kind of get confusing. So the first thing we need to review is that Israel and the church are distinct. The church has not replaced Israel. As we look in Romans chapter 11, verse 24, the Apostle Paul says, "For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature," and he's speaking of the church, "and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree," speaking of the root of Jesse, right? The olive tree is the Jewish, the Abrahamic bloodline. "How much more will these who are natural branches, Jewish, be grafted into their olive tree?" So if God is able to graft a wild olive shoot, Gentiles, non-Jewish people, graft them into by faith the root of Jesse, so that we might receive all of the blessings that God has promised to the church, how much more is he able to graft in the original branch that has been cut off due to their sin of rejecting Messiah as a nation? There's coming a day where Israel will receive Messiah, will receive Jesus Christ as their king, and that will be where they're grafted back in. And all of the promises that God has given the nation of Israel will come to completion on this earth with Jesus ruling and reigning his people. With that said, the church also has been wonderfully blessed with promises that will also take place simultaneously. So if you don't have a distinction between Israel and the church, if you're going to end up replacing all of the promises of Israel, you're going to take those and put those on the church only, and your eschatology is going to be all messed up. So just for clarity's sake, make sure you have a distinction between Israel and the church. And then just real quickly, a review of the major events of eschatology. As we see the times approaching, there will be imminently catching up of the saints. The church will be lifted up with Christ in the air, which we call the rapture. 1 Thessalonians 4:17 says this, if you want to look it up. And it says, it ties that rapture event with being with him forever. So from that point on, from the rapture on, if you want to know where you will be, if you are in Christ, wherever Christ is, you're going to be, because it says we will be with him forever. It doesn't say we will be with him and then he's going to leave and come back and we'll be apart for 1,000. No, we're going to be wherever Christ is from that point on. So if Christ is ruling and reigning after the catching up of the saints, if he's going to be ruling and reigning on this earth, then you better believe we're also going to be here with him in some capacity. I don't really know exactly how that's going to look, but that's the promise. All right, so we have the rapture. Then, so the church is out of here. Then we have a 7-year period, 7 literal years of tribulation. And during that 7 years is where God is going to be chastening and bringing and wooing the people of Israel to himself by as he pours out his wrath on this world. The nation of Israel will recognize Jesus Christ as the Messiah. There will be people that die for faith in God during the tribulation, and they too will be joining Christ in his millennial reign. So during that 7-year period of tribulation, there will be lots of death, lots of destruction, lots of evil. And the Antichrist and the false prophet and the 10 kings and all of that, that's going to rear its ugly head during that time. At the end of those 7 years, we see the second coming of Christ. And that's what takes us to this passage in Psalm 48, where Christ returns. When he came from the church, we meet him in the air. So he doesn't really come all the way. We sort of meet him in the air. as the bride of Christ. The second coming of Christ refers to after the tribulation, where we join him, because wherever he is, we will be with him. We join him as he comes and sets up his rule and reign here on this earth for 1,000 years. And all of the promises that God has given Israel will be fulfilled in the promised land during that time. And it will be all things he will work to put under his feet. First Corinthians 15:26 says that the last thing that he puts under his feet will be death. Everything he's going to bring into submission, all power and rule and authority will be under him. And then the very last thing he conquers will be death itself. Death, the last enemy. 1 Corinthians 15:26. Once that happens, then he will offer up all that he's put underneath him to the Father. And then that's when God the Father makes the new Jerusalem, the new heaven, the new earth will be created, and we will dwell with God the Father in a way that we will not be dwelling during the millennial reign. We will be with Christ as he is king, both politically and spiritually, but we will not be with the Father in the same way during the millennial reign as we will in the new heaven and new earth, when Christ has subjected even death underneath him, and he offers up all that has been put under him to the Father. And then that will be forever and ever and ever, that we will be, there's no need for a son anymore, because we will be in the glory and the light of the Father. So truly extraordinary what is ahead of us as we looked at our Christian doctrine and our eschatology. But let me, without any further ado, jump in here to Psalm 48, because this is during that tribulation period. After that tribulation period is ended, and we are ushered into the messianic reign of Jesus Christ in Jerusalem, the holy city. Okay, entitled "The Glory of God in Zion," Psalm 48, a song, a psalm for the sons of Korah. So this is meant to be sung. I will not sing it for you at this moment. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north. The city of the great King. God is in her palaces. He is known as her refuge. That phrase, sides of the north, is one other time we see that in Scripture, and it's in Isaiah 14. I'll turn there quickly here. 14, and I'm going to read starting in verse 12. And this is the fall of Lucifer. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations! For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. And that's where we see that phrase, both here in Isaiah and then in the passage that we're looking at, Psalm 48:2. And so whatever the sides of the north is in reference to, there's different ideas, but we know that Satan covets this, and Satan wants to put himself in the place of God, right? And so that's not going to happen. The created doesn't put himself in the place of the creator. So it's a futile plan on his part. Nonetheless, he is devoted to it. Verse 4, for behold, the kings assembled, they passed by together. Now the kings, who are these kings? Well, in Revelation 13:1, we have mention of these kings. And then also Revelation chapter 19, verse 19, the 10 kings, one of those being, in addition, the Antichrist. And this is reminiscent of the 10 toes of Daniel's interpretation of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. As we expect there to be 10 rulers, 10 kings, a mix of iron and clay. And as that rock rolls down the hill and crushes the kingdoms of the earth, that rock being Christ, we see this playing out in this psalm here. So the kings assemble, they passed by together, and they saw it, and so they marveled. They were troubled, they hastened away. Fear took hold of them there, and pain as a woman in birth pains. Now, I've been present during childbirth, and those cries are from the mother giving birth are quite extraordinary, to say the least. Um, and this is how they will be crying out in fear, in trouble, running away, hastening away, um, as they look upon the majesty, the power that Jesus Christ brings as King. In verse 7, as when you break the ships to Tarshish with an east wind. And this is just a reference. If you can picture a ship, a large ship being dashed by the wind up against rocks. This is how helpless these apparently these kings are going to be very, very powerful. A great amount of authority been given to them over the period of the tribulation, but it'll just be like a ship being dashed upon the rocks as Christ returns in his second coming. Verse 8, as we have heard, so we have seen. In the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God, God will establish it forever. Selah. Forever. Think about that. Verse 9, we have thought, O God, on your loving kindness in the midst of your temple. According to your name, O God, so is your praise to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is full of righteousness. Let Mount Zion rejoice. Let the daughters of Judah be glad because of your judgments. Now, when it says Mount Zion, it's talking about Mount Zion, Jerusalem. It's not figurative. This is the actual, this is Jerusalem on this earth here now for 1,000 years, where Jesus will be ruling and reigning with all authority. And the daughters of Judah, these are going to be the during the millennial reign, all of the Israel around will be happy and glad because of his rule and reign being perfectly just. Verse 12, walk about Zion and go all around her, count her towers, mark well her bulwarks, consider her palaces, that you may tell it to the generation following. For this is God, our God forever and ever. He will be our guide even to death. So in other words, they're going to be able to walk around the city and be like, look, not a pillar has been knocked down. Nothing's even happened to the city, because Christ is going to be that devastating towards these kings that assemble against him at that battle at the end of the tribulation period, as Antichrist seeks to come against Christ. And then they'll be able to look around and be like, look, he's saved Jerusalem from destruction. And then I'll end with this thought. This psalm ends with, he will be our guide even to death. I want to look at this context and say, well, it can't be death, because there is going to be the death is going to be the last enemy. We talked about that. It must mean forever and ever, like the end. Even he's going to guide us until the end, like forever and ever. Well, that was already stated in verse 8, that God will establish this forever. But I really think that it just means even to death. As we talked about in 1 Corinthians 15:26, that Christ is going to put death under him. He is going to conquer death. So when it says even to death, it's not talking about, hey, God's going to be your guide until you die, and then he won't be your guide anymore. But it's talking about God is going to be your guide. Jesus is going to be your guide even until he puts death under his rule and authority and power. And his resurrection life is going to conquer even death as he submits then finally to the Father, and the new heaven and new earth. We enter into that new creation, the new Jerusalem. So I can't wait until even death has been defeated by Messiah, Jesus Christ, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and all things will be put under him. perfectly as he presents all of creation to our Father. So bless you today as you think upon these things. Look forward with me. Look up. He's coming. The time is drawing nigh. He is coming for his bride. Are you ready? Are you prepared? Get those garments ready because the bridegroom is coming.